Hello friends, have a tremendous hyper-mega greeting from Accusatin Aritman.
Welcome today, September 16th, to a new video. My wish is that the love of God invades hearts so that they can love their neighbor by obeying the 10 Commandments. Friends, the other day I was taking a look at Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si and I came across chapter 7, which deals with the Trinity and the relationship between creatures. Specifically, I went to paragraph 239, which says, "For Christians, believing in one God who is a Trinitarian communion leads us to think that all of reality contains within itself a properly Trinitarian mark."
Yes, friends, a properly Trinitarian mark.
It's very curious, too curious, that Pope Francis uses a word that has been the subject of great scrutiny in Christianity, the word mark.
It's tremendous, friends.
As we know, the encyclical Laudato Si will soon become the Magna Carta of the great global theocratic republic, which is about to be established. And as we have already learned, when this great theocratic government issues a decree or law with purely religious intent, we will understand that this decree or law with religious purposes is undoubtedly the mark of the beast. Because a great union of church and state has been established that compels citizens to perform religious rituals and traditions of men without biblical basis. Of course, this deserves our study, friends, because we know that some countries already have a union of church and state, even if they haven't made it public. Even the United States already has a union of church and state, so we must understand what is the mark of the beast. And it's curious that Pope Francis spoke in his encyclical Laudato Si about the Trinitarian mark. It's very, very curious, friends. It's a specific word that, of course, has to do with the Trinity. In past videos, I showed you that the Trinity is not biblical. We even examined how the symbol of the Trinity, called triqueta, comes from the number 666.
Coincidentally, now we have Pope Francis saying that the whole world must receive the Trinitarian mark.
But the most interesting thing is that the Catholic Church refers to this Trinitarian mark as a communion with this Trinitarian God through the Eucharist or the sacraments. So we find yet another proof that the mark of the beast will actually come from an apparently Christian church. It's curious that Pope Francis used the word Trinitarian mark. Let's remember that I warned you in past videos that in the near future, there might be a survey in which you will be asked whether you believe in the Trinity or not, or maybe you will be required to stand in front of a facial recognition camera at the entrance of a church, or maybe your face will be recorded and recognized when you participate in a religious ritual on Sundays. The fact, my friends, is that we see the world confused with this issue of climate change, Pope Francis, ecology, and the worship of Mother Earth in connection with Catholicism. The encyclical Laudato Si presents itself as a book that aims to solve the world's climate change issue. In paragraph 237, Pope Francis' solution to mitigate climate catastrophes is Sunday rest. Furthermore, it says, Sunday, participation in the Eucharist has a special importance. This day, like the Jewish Sabbath, is offered as a day of healing the human relationship with God and oneself. Thus, the day of rest, centered on the Eucharist, sheds its light on the entire week and motivates us to incorporate the care of nature and the poor. Incredible, friends, but seeing is believing. A religion that now apparently intends to mix the worship of Mother Earth with Christianity.
That's how things are.
Pope Francis is telling us something very clear: rest is not simply rest or do nothing, because we see that rest must be linked to communion and worship. Therefore, we see that rest only becomes rest when there is worship and communion with God. Pope Francis also indicates that Sunday rest, on the first day of the week, can only be rest if it focuses on worship, perhaps through the Eucharist or through baptism.
What will this Trinitarian mark that Pope Francis speaks of be like? Let's understand what this Trinitarian mark that Pope Francis speaks of consists of. Let's see what is real rest on the Shabbat day, which is Saturday, on the seventh day. As the fourth commandment states, we see that true rest is not to dedicate yourself to leisure, or taking a walk in the park, or simply lying in bed watching TV. No, that is not true rest on the Shabbat day. The real Shabbat rest only becomes true rest if you have worship with God, for example, if you are worshiping God in spirit and truth on that Shabbat day. Similarly, we see that the false day of rest only becomes a false day of rest if there is false worship, for example when you are forced to go to church on Sunday to worship the Trinity. This could be the Trinitarian mark that is being referred to by Pope Francis. So now we can make sense of Pope Francis' words.
The mark of the beast by itself cannot simply be resting on Sunday without doing anything. There must be an obligation to perform some specific ritual, perhaps in conjunction with worshiping the Trinity. That may be when the Trinitarian mark is received, which would ultimately be the mark of the beast. We understand what Pope Francis is saying in his encyclical Laudato Si, that humans tend to reduce contemplative rest to the realm of the unfruitful works, forgetting that it takes away from the most important aspect of the work being done, its purpose. What he means is that rest is such as not rest if it is simply being at home watching television. Rest must go hand in hand with worship, just like it should happen on Saturday, which is the real Shabbat day. The Bible states that the true day of rest only occurs when you are worshiping God.
Likewise, we understand that the false day of rest should only occur when worshiping a false god.
This could be the Trinitarian mark that Pope Francis is talking about, my friends.
While we see that soon a state law will be enacted that obliges people to perform some religious ritual on a false day of rest, like Sunday, where people are forced to worship the Trinity through the Eucharist or baptism, that's when we will be facing the true mark of the beast. We see that, if you obey Pope Francis' words, and worship the Trinity on this false day of rest, this false Shabbat day, which is called Sunday, then you will receive the mark of the beast, and that would mean you will be lost forever. Now, my friends, let's understand what Pope Francis is saying, because if you rest on Sunday by simply watching television, it's like attending a weekly holiday, like the 4th of July. There is no element of worship even though you are obeying a false day of rest on Sunday, however you are not worshiping the false god. You have to be forced to worship the false Trinitarian God. That's the question we need to ask ourselves. So, my friends, let's understand that when this great global theocracy is formed, which will force people to receive the mark of the beast, we wonder if this is the Trinitarian mark that Pope Francis is talking about, which could be received in the Eucharist by making the sign of the cross or receiving the sacraments. Furthermore, we see that there are some Christian churches, including the Adventist Church, that worship the Trinity, which means they will receive the mark of the beast. Well, my friends, the Pope has clearly stated that God's creation must have a Trinitarian mark. In past videos, I talked a lot about how the Trinity has no biblical basis. The word Trinity doesn't even appear in the Bible. The Trinitarian God is incapable of begetting, therefore, this infertile God does not seem to be omnipotent. We also see that this Trinitarian God would seem to have lied when Jesus was being baptized and said in Matthew 3 verse 17, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." So, this Trinitarian God must have lied to us, since Jesus is not really his Son, but it is just a manifestation of his being. So we understand that our true God is not Trinitarian, he is the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. And this means that the Father begot Jesus. However, we can't help but wonder if we believe in the Trinity, would Jesus have also lied when he said in Mark 15 verse 34, my God, why have you forsaken me?" If Jesus were a Trinitarian God, it wouldn't make any sense for him to cry out to a God, which he called Father, when this God is Jesus himself. Then Jesus would be lying to us, since after all, he would be talking to himself, not to another God, which he called his Father. Then we ask another question. How can a God abandon himself? Obviously, it's impossible. But Jesus was clearly reciting Psalm 22. Friends, we see the world confused with this issue of climate change, ecology, and the worship of Mother Earth, mixed with Catholicism. A false Christian religion that now apparently intends to mix the worship of Mother Earth with Christianity. So, my friends, let us understand that when this great global theocracy is formed, which will force people to receive the mark of the beast, we wonder if this is the Trinitarian mark that Pope Francis speaks of, which could be received in the Eucharist by making the sign of the cross or receiving the sacraments. Furthermore, we see that some Christian churches, including the Adventist Church, worship the Trinity, which means that they will receive the mark of the beast. See you soon, friends.